Every leader knows that a thriving organization depends on the energy, productivity, and commitment of its people. But few leaders are able to cultivate the employee engagement and performance needed for this level of success. What's the difference? Positive leadership practices. Welcome to the Positive Leadership Movement Podcast with your host, positive work culture expert, Alex Bratty. Ready to harness the power of positive leadership? Let's dive right in.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Positive Leadership Movement. I'm your host, Alex Bratty, and in this episode, you're going to discover the key to unleashing your organization's full potential, which is focusing on the good and taking a strengths-based approach. You're also going to discover why this positive strengths-based approach to leadership produces extraordinary results, how to identify your own strengths and the strengths of your employees, and how to leverage those strengths once you know them so you can reach new levels of excellence and achievement. All right, so as always, as you can hear, this episode is jam-packed full of value and action-oriented content that is designed to help you be the best positive leader you can be. So let's dive right in. Now, I said at the very top that the key to unleashing your organization's full potential is to focus on the good and to adopt a strengths-based approach to leadership. Yes, this is one of the crucial elements that makes you a positive leader. In our last episode, episode 4, you may recall that we talked about the 2 core elements that make someone a positive leader. And if you missed that episode, be sure to check it out. But just as a quick recap, essentially, a positive leader engages in small actions that have a profound impact over time, and they are committed to looking for and focusing on the good. Now, in that last episode, we looked at some of the small actions you can take to foster a positive climate. And so in this episode, we'll discuss that second aspect of being a positive leader, focusing on the good and taking a strengths-based approach. All right, so why should leaders be focused on the good and what's going well? I mean, as a leader, there are just so many problems to deal with, right? So many issues to solve and challenges to deal with. It's not hard to be fully focused on what's going wrong, right? I mean, that is essentially what usurps our attention day in and day out. And the simple fact is that as humans, we are hardwired to look for the negative. It's that primitive lizard part of our brain, the amygdala, that's constantly scanning for threats. This is, of course, an adaptive human feature, right? Chances are you might not be here today if your ancestors hadn't had this built-in capacity, right? They likely would have been eaten by a lion or had some other fateful ending if they hadn't instinctively been looking for what's wrong or what's negative in their environment. But in today's world, the daily threats we face aren't quite the same. And so we don't have to be in that constant state of high alert. In fact, when we are, the research shows that it restricts our thinking, our creativity, and the options we see available to us. So it really does not serve us very well to always be scanning for the negative, particularly in the organizational context. On the other hand, when we retrain our brains to look for the positive, the research shows that it leads to faster and more creative cognitive processing, right? So your brain is working at a better speed and at a better capability, if you like. And we're able to solve problems in new and different ways. So there's a lot to be said for scanning the environment for what's going right each day. Now, one of the ways you can institutionalize that habit is by adopting a strengths-based approach in the workplace. And what this means is identifying the strengths of your employees and allowing them to play to those strengths. This doesn't mean you're going to ignore all the weaknesses, okay, before everybody starts to get upset about that. No, certainly we need some attention to be paid to those too, but it does mean that there will be an emphasis on building upon the strengths that already exist. So like I said, before we end up with people panicking that we're just going to, create a bunch of people who are only good at certain tasks and not at others, let's just stop and think about that for a moment, right? Like, why are we worried about that? Don't you want your employees to be skilled specialists rather than a bunch of generalists who are Jack or Jackie of all trades and masters or mistresses of none, right? Should an Olympic athlete focus on getting better and better at their specific event or learning others? Right? Should a carpenter spend time honing his or her skill at crafting with wood or learning how to be a plumber? Should a researcher focus his or her time on conducting research or learning computer programming languages? I mean, I could go on and on, right? But I think you get my point. We want our employees to be the best they can be at what they're good at, right? The old school approach of conducting evaluations that gloss over what people are good at and hone in on the areas of improvement or weaknesses are turning a bunch of employees into generalists. And that's not going to serve us that well, right? And frankly, trying to be good at everything usually means that you end up not being particularly excellent at anything, right? And that is not what we want. We're trying to build excellence. So instead, if we focus on building up strengths, the research shows over and over that in organizations, employees are happier, they're more engaged, they're more productive, they're more committed to the organization and its goals, and they perform at a higher level. Now, as a leader, that is the holy grail. That is what we're aiming for every day, right? Is to have motivated and high-performing employees who want to be at the organization and contribute to its excellence. Focusing on strengths is a direct pathway to achieving that goal of extraordinary performance. I assure you, stick with me. So how do we do this? How do we actually make it happen? Well, the first step is to identify your own strengths and have your employees identify their strengths. And now you might say, well, I already know what I'm good at. Why would I need to do that? Why would any of us need to do that? Isn't it obvious what we're good at? And to that I say, awesome. I am so happy that you know what some of your strengths are and what you're good at. But guess what? You have other strengths you don't know about. I promise you. You see, the tricky little aspect of strengths is that we're often blind to our own strengths. You see, we can be so good at something and it comes so naturally to us that we think everyone must have that same experience, that same skill set or trait, that everyone must do this particular thing well. How could they not? Isn't it so easy? No. That's exactly where you're blind to your strengths. What comes naturally to you is your strength, and chances are it does not come naturally to others. For others, it'd be like nails across a chalkboard, right? So it's almost like your strengths are your own special superpowers. And once you know what these special superpowers are, you can use them in new and different ways that elevate your productivity and performance. And it's the same for everyone in your organization. All right, so how do we do this? How do we identify our strengths? Well, there's actually a few different ways you can do this. And so to keep it simple, I'm only going to share 3 of them with you today, right? But there's a lot of research in this area. There's a lot of different ways you can go. But these are the 3 that I believe, based on all my research and based on the results, that I think are the most powerful and will be the most effective for you, okay? Because as you know, I only share with you proven methods. I only share with you techniques and strategies that have actually been rigorously tested and are, they're evidence-based, and we know them to be true and that they will work, okay? So I'm going to share 3 of those with you today for how to identify your strengths. The first one is to have you and your teams take the Clifton Strengths Assessment, right? And this is by Gallup. So you may have heard of this one. It's been around for a while. This is an assessment that is designed to specifically assess strengths in the workplace, all right? And you can find it by going to their website, gallupstrengthcenter.com. It's based on the work of the late Dr. Don Clifton, who many consider to be the father of strengths-based work in organizations. And essentially there are 34, they call them themes of talent, okay? There are 34 strengths or themes of talent that are identified by the assessment, such as achiever or focus or consistency. And of course, they give you a description of what all these mean, right? So you take the test and it gives you your top 5 themes or your top 5 strengths. You do have to pay for this assessment, but you'll see options for yourself, your team, your organization on the website. Okay, so that's one option available to you. The second one is really kind of interesting because it's not a self-reported assessment, okay? The second one is the Reflected Best Self exercise, and this was developed by professors at the University of Michigan. And it's an exercise whereby you and each of your employees reaches out to about 10 to 20 people in various aspects of your life, right? Work, obviously, but also family, friends, community, different aspects of life. And you ask these people to write 3 short stories, essentially just a paragraph or 2, about you when you were at your best. Like, what were you doing? What strengths of character or strengths were you demonstrating, right? This one takes longer to do, obviously, because not everybody's going to write their story the instant that you email them and ask them for it. So it takes a little while to gather these. But what's interesting about this is you really get to see that perspective of how other people see you. And it's very revealing because, we really are truly blind to our own strengths. So someone may look at you and say, wow, she is just so amazing at just getting things done, or so amazing at connecting people, or, so amazing at analyzing this data that nobody wants to look at. And you might read it and be like, really? You think that's amazing? Like, I think that's normal. Guess what? That's a superpower. That's a strength. It's natural to you. Other people are in awe of it, right? So the Reflected Best Self exercise can be really cool for that. Now, the third way to identify your strengths, and I have to confess, total disclosure, having used all 3 of the strengths identification methods I'm sharing with you today, this is the one I'm most partial to, and that I use the most when I'm running training sessions in organizations. And it is the VIA, Values and Actions, it stands for. So VIA, it's the VIA Character Strengths Self-Assessment. Now, you can take an absolutely free version of this at viacharacter.org. So that's VIA character.org. Or if you want to pay a nominal fee, you can get a full report and all the insights along with your assessment results, right? So you have the choice there. Now, why do I like this one the best? Well, several reasons, actually. First, unlike the Clifton Strengths Finder, the Gallup option, right? It's not limited to strengths in the workplace. It provides a readout of your personal strengths that can be used in and out of the workplace. In fact, in all aspects of your life. Now, of course, are we focused on organizations in this podcast? Absolutely. But as we often say, organizations are comprised of people. People are multifaceted. Our lives are multifaceted. More and more, the lines between personal and professional are blurred. And if we want to encourage more humanity and positive leadership in our organizations, such as practicing gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion, in our organizations, in our workplace, as we talked about in episode 4, then we need to recognize the whole person and all their strengths, not just those that are confined to our professional lives, right? So that's reason number 1 that I really love this one. Second, the method by which this assessment has been developed and tested is grounded in some serious science. Now, I'm not saying the others aren't, but wait till you hear this, okay? The VIA Character Strengths Assessment, it's been developed and honed over the last 20 years in the field of positive psychology, right? Its genesis came from the father of positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania, and Dr. Chris Peterson, the late Dr. Chris Peterson from University of Michigan. And they decided they wanted to better understand the good and virtuous elements of the human existence, okay? So they gathered a group of 50 scientists to pore over all the literature that exists on this, from the ancient philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, to every religious scripture, okay? So the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, and across all cultures. It took them 3 years to do this, right? That's a lot of reading. That is a lot of analyzing. And what they found was, so after all of this research, they boiled it down to this. What they found is that there are 24 character strengths that are universal. And they're universal in 2 ways. First, they're universal in the sense that they are recognized and valued around the world, across all cultures and religions, okay? Second, they are universal in the sense that we all have each of these 24 character strengths within us, but we each have a different combination, okay? So then what these scientists did is they developed an assessment that has since been tested and refined for accuracy over many years. And it will not only show you your top 5 character strengths, right? Which is really, that's all you get with Gallup. You get your top 5 themes or strengths, right? So you'll see your top 5 strengths with the VIA character strengths, but it will also give you your own personal ranking of all 24. So you will see exactly what your character strength ranking is for all of them, okay? All right, and third and final reason that I'm particularly partial to this self-assessment is that it ties in beautifully with positive leadership, okay? As we've already discussed, positive leaders are those who choose to engage in small actions that foster a positive climate where gratitude, forgiveness, and compassion are exercised on a regular basis. Well, guess what? Character strengths dovetail with these concepts beautifully because some of the strengths of character include items, traits such as gratitude, honesty, hope, love, perseverance. Essentially, this assessment tells you who you are at your absolute core and authentic self. And it is those authentic selves that we want to build up in our organization as positive leaders. All right, so you have 3 simple options to choose from to identify your strengths, all right? You have the Clifton Strengths Assessment. It'll give you your top 5, and it's workplace focused only, right? Workplace strengths. You have the Reflected Best Self exercise. That's the one where you reach out to people in your life and get them to write stories and gather those. So that's sort of an outside perspective. And you've got the VIA Character Strengths Assessment where you'll get all 24 of your strengths rank ordered. So you know your top 5, but you also know your bottom 5 and everywhere in between. All right. So whatever one you choose. And by the way, I mean, you personally, if you want to experiment with this, you can do them all, right? But if you're doing this for your team, you're probably going to just want to pick one and go with it. So whatever one you choose, you and your teams are going to know more about what your special blend of superpowers and strengths is after you do it, okay? Each one of them is going to be valuable to you, okay? All right, so then what, right? What do we do once we know what our special strengths and superpowers are, right? Well, we actually have to leverage them, right? And we want to do that because we know from decades of research and hundreds of studies that when people use their strengths, they are more engaged and productive in their work. They experience more job satisfaction, loyalty, and commitment to the organization. And that, of course, all translates to a flourishing organization operating at levels of excellence that are also reflected in its financial performance, right? So how do we do this? How do we leverage our strengths? Well, first off, you need to create a supportive environment so that people are focused on strengths, okay? So for example, some teams I've worked with employees pin up their top 5 strengths at their desk, right? So people start to get to know, oh, okay, these are your strengths, right? And of course, it reminds them personally, oh, these are my strengths, right? Some put it in their email signature. The idea is to display these so that others immediately recognize them. And by the way, doing this almost immediately improves communication within and between teams because now people begin to understand, oh, that's why Jim always wants to get into the details in creative meetings because one of his strengths is being analytical. Or, oh, that's why Maureen always asks questions because her top strength is curiosity. You see how this works? It not only helps each individual recognize their strengths, it also helps others and improves relationships because there's a greater understanding of who each person is and where they're coming from and what they can especially contribute. All right, so you've established a supportive environment, okay? One of the simplest ways to start leveraging strengths is to have you and your teams use their top strengths in different ways each day for a few weeks, all right? Now may sound really simple, but this is, like all of these successful methods that I share with you, it is simple. They're all simple. We just make them too hard, right? So this is a very simple method. It's highly successful. It's been tested over and over with great results. And here's all you have to do. You can do one of 2 things. You can pick one of your top strengths and use it in a different way every day for a week. Okay. And then so the next week you'd pick another strength and do the same thing, right? Or the other way you can do it is just every day pick a top strength and use it in a new or different way, right? So you could, in 1 week, instead of just using one strength in different ways, you could perhaps use 2, 3, 4 of your top strengths in new and different ways, right? You can vary it. But the point here is that you're essentially starting to use your strengths in new and different ways. Now, there's a reason for that, okay? It's not, notice that I'm not just telling you, okay, now here's your strengths, use them more. I'm not telling you to do that because strengths are contextual, right? The use of some strengths in some contexts is not appropriate at all, okay? And can actually have an adverse impact. We have to be smart about when we're choosing to leverage our strengths and doing it in the right context. And so that's why instead of me just saying to you, okay, go out and do it more, I'm telling you to use them in new and different ways, right? Looking for opportunities to leverage your strengths because you'll also get really attuned to, oh yeah, this is a great opportunity for me to actually leverage this strength right now, okay? Because if we just go and try to maximize strength use, we're gonna run into a couple of buzzsaws, right? Like for example, I'll give you a classic example. So I have a colleague who just so high on analytics and curiosity, right? These are top strengths for him. And so guess what? He asks a lot of questions because he wants to analyze. He's curious. He wants to know. Well, I can tell you that works well for him when he's in certain meetings at work, okay? And it works well for him when he's being given a project. So he really clarifies with people exactly what they want, right? And it works for him when he's working with clients because, of course, your clients want you to be asking questions of them so that they know you understand their needs, okay? So it works for him in really great ways in multiple contexts. However, when he is at home, and his wife is telling him a story, it does not work well, okay? It does not work well when he is interrupting her every second sentence and wanting more details on a specific aspect of the story. She just wants to tell the story. She's happy to answer questions, but it's like, can you just wait till the end? Can I just tell the story instead of you analyzing it to death here, right? So, I mean, that's a cute little example, but you get my point, right? Some strengths are not, they're not always called for in all contexts. And so that's why it's not about maxing. It's about using your strengths in new and different ways, okay? So let me give you an example of this. Let's say a top strength for someone is perspective, okay, which is all about seeing the big picture and considering different sources and experiences to arrive at a conclusion, okay? That person could use their strength of perspective in a new way by, say, listening more closely to others in meetings, seeking to understand their perspective, like actually elicit someone else's perspective, and then sharing their own in a respectful manner, of course, right? Or maybe, and this is where you can get creative with this, right? Maybe they think of the wisest quotation they've ever heard, right? A perspective that they just find to be so wise. And they then think of a way that they can live more truly to that quote, right? Holding themselves to a higher standard. I mean, you can really have fun and get creative with this, right? And what happens is, as each person explores new and different ways to use their strengths, they're able to be more uniquely and authentically who they are. And you might notice that even after a few weeks, when the exercise is officially over, guess what? People want to continue it. It doesn't end because they're deriving so much satisfaction from it. And they're more engaged in their work than ever before. And of course, that is what positive leadership is all about. Positive leadership is about creating an environment where people can be themselves and use their strengths every single day so that they feel fulfilled and they want to come to work every day. And as people start to flourish in their work, so too does the organization. All right, so there you have it. This week, we talked about how to unleash your organization's full potential. And it's by focusing on the good and using a strengths-based approach to organizational development. We looked at 3 different ways you can identify your strengths: the Clifton Strengths Assessment, the Reflected Best Self exercise, and the VIA, V-I-A, the VIA Character Strengths Assessment. And we talked about how to begin leveraging those strengths once they've been identified, right? And the simplest way to do that is just to start using top strengths in new and different ways each day. And we'll get into more strategies on strengths in other episodes, but that is a tried and true method to start getting results quickly and easily. And that's what I always want you to do. I don't want to create barriers here. I want to create opportunity for you so that you actually take what I'm sharing and you take action with it and you start to receive results for yourself, all right? So what do we have coming up next week? We're going to dive into an aspect of positive leadership that we touched on briefly in this episode, and that is relationships, okay? How do you build positive relationships and improve communication within and between teams, right? So we talked about that a little bit in the context of once your team starts to recognize each other's strengths, they then start to really understand each other and communication improves, right? So we touched on it a little bit, but we're going to go deeper on that in the next episode. So it's, how do you build these positive relationships and improve communication so that not only is your organization running like a well-oiled machine, but it's also got a beating heart that's fostering a sense of community and belonging, right? So join me next week as we jump into the importance of positive relationships and how to develop them in your organization. And if you've got a question about positive leadership, let me know. Email me at questions@positiveleadershipmovement.com and I will answer your question in a future episode. For now, this is Alex Bratty signing off and thanking you for being part of the Positive Leadership Movement.
Make sure you subscribe to the show. If you like this episode, please rate and review. If you want to get more from Alex, check out Happiness at Work, where she provides leaders with a proven path to cultivate a positive work culture that increases performance, productivity, and profitability. Go to happinessatworknow.com. Join us next week and harness the power of positive leadership for your organization.